Good morning and a warm welcome to this first seminar today. We are going to talk about from contracts to collaboration, enabling rapid access to defense capabilities. My name is Hannah Olofsson. I'm Chief of Staff at the Swedish Security and Defense Industry Association, and I will be your moderator for today. With me, we have an esteemed panel. We have Vice Admiral Eva Skog Hasslum from the Swedish Armed Forces. We have Anja Klausin, Director General, the National Agency for Public Procurement. We have Paul Finley, all the way from the UK, Public Sector Defence Lead at PA Consulting. And we have Helene Wedin, Commercial Director from Swedish Defence Material Administration. A warm welcome to you all. We can start with giving them a short round of applause. It always feels better in the beginning. So as you may all know, we see a worsening security situation in Europe. Sweden recently joined to be an ally in NATO. We also heard about the need for aligned procurement, operation and strategy objectives to enhance readiness, as well as, at least here in the Swedish context, the key word is speed. We don't have the time as we had before. So to kick off this panel, I would like to invite Paul to give us some opening remarks or thoughts on the topics we will be talking to. So over to you, Paul.
Sure, thank you, Anna. Welcome, everybody. I feel excited about this conversation we're about to have, the exchange of ideas that we're about to go. I also feel mightily relieved, I have to say, that we're conducting this in English, which I believe is not the norm for Almedalen. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for having us. Thank you for coming. So I'm Paul Finley. I'm the Public Sector Defence Lead for PA Consulting, and we're helping in the UK right across the enterprise, from developing new technologies right through to how do we make the whole enterprise work better, and to your point, Anna, how do we help it to work at what we call a pace of relevance to the battlefield. When you look at the security context in Europe today, I think as little as 5 years ago, very few of us would have expected to be in the situation that we're in. And yet here we are, welcoming Sweden into NATO, which is super. And our colleagues right now in The Hague discussing how we increase the minimum defence spend for NATO to 3.5 plus 1.5%, which when I think only less than a handful of countries were achieving 2% just a couple of years ago. It is a paradigm shift. What is happening right now between Russia and Ukraine is obviously the focus of a lot of attention. What we need to do immediately to react to that, to react to the what-ifs of that, is a really important thing for us to do. What we also need to do is look a bit further into the future. The Northern European plain is an interesting thing. The one thing that we know after everything has achieved some level of stability is that the shape of the Northern European plain won't have changed. And across the Northern European plain, Russia's been invaded 4 times in the last 150 years. So there is a proper geopolitical thing for us to address there, and we need to think about, for the future, while we are looking at a massively quick evolution of technology and how we do defence and security, we need to be thinking about, in that future, how are we going to deliver that equilibrium? And right now, there is going to be a much greater military component to that than there has been in the past. So what does all of that mean? All of that means that we need to move fast in 2 ways. We need to move fast to deal with what's happening now. We also need to recognise that the pace of technology change is not going to slow down. And so we need a machine that builds our defence and security in a way that is able to move and evolve really quickly long into the future. That means we need a machine for acquiring capability that is able to move quickly. And it means that we need that machine to be able to evolve capability really quickly once it's been delivered. So how do we do that? Well, there's a number of levers. The biggest, and strangely often overlooked, is what do we buy? So what capabilities do we have, and how do we form them? That gives you probably the largest degree of latitude in how quickly you can deliver it. And then there's the how you buy it. And that is about how do we architect those capabilities? What are they made of? How do we get as much into the software-defined space as we can, where you can change capability really quickly? And then how do we get really good at the practicalities of that? How do we attack the bureaucracy that grows, particularly in the public procurement space, and keep that to a necessary minimum in order that the whole machine can go quickly? And then how do we build, both shape the industrial base that we need, that provides pace and resilience and sustainability, and how do we contract for all of that and set the rules of the game and the commercial and financial conditions that enable industry to behave in the way that we need them to behave, in order that we get the pace of capability delivery out of the back end. We're helping with all of these things in the UK, and we're looking forward to both hearing other views and learning ideas, as well as maybe sharing some of our own experiences through the course of this morning as well. So thank you for coming, thank you for having us, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, and I think we should start actually based on the Swedish NATO membership, and this is a question for first maybe the Swedish part of the panel, and Paul, I would love to hear your comments. And we can start with you, Eva. Same question goes for all three of you, but do you see any new capability needs based on the NATO becoming ally, or do you see any capability needs that have been accelerated? And how have you, as a chief of the joint operations, been working on that topic, Eva?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me here. Of course, the NATO ship has set new demands for us as well, but despite NATO or not, I guess that the development that you're talking about, Paul, that is accelerating the speed of the technologies, that goes also for the tactics. The tactics is accelerating as well. So it's really hard today to say what kind of demands we have in the future. Yeah. And if I knew that, I would absolutely set those demands on a paper straight away and just have that innovation ongoing. So the demands is hard to actually set. So we need to work together from the start, both the technology-wise and the tactical-wise, and actually just to merge all our experiences we have in the path, because it goes so quickly today. So I really emphasize what you're saying, Paul, as well, that we have to look for new ways of how we develop our material and how we procure. And at the same time, doing that, we are operating with same personnel and material as we speak, 24/7. At the same time, we try to be innovative, and that is quite hard. I would really like to have the lab that we can use for the innovation things.
Similar to the Air Force.
Exactly, and just have those experiences exchanged with each other, but we don't have that. So few people, few procured material systems are going to be as innovative as we want to. But of course, the NATO pushed us really much more forward. But I'm also very proud that what we are enforcing into NATO, what we actually can, because since we have been non-military allied, we have so many different capabilities that actually we are just going to erase the capacity-wise. So I think we can actually, and with the industry we have in Sweden and everything, I think actually we are on top of it, but we need to be a little bit more speedy.
Yeah. And Helen, from the FMV side, hearing what Eva says, you're on the other side of the coin of the armed forces. So have you been working? You're seeing their views, and how are you taking that back to the agency you're working with?
Well, we do see a lot of needs, but I think one of the biggest needs we have to work with is to catch up with a capability target, to work with the current and future capability target of NATO. And to work with Ukraine at the same time. That makes a lot of pressure on us.
Yeah, that's dual challenge
Yep,
at the same
it
time,
is.
both requiring quite a lot of speed. Anja, you represent a different type of agency, but equally important in the NATO capability targets, actually. What's your views? And maybe a brief, what's your role in this group?
Well, in this role, in this group, actually, I represent the Swedish National Agency for Public Procurement, the NAP, so we refer to that. And we support both the procuring side and also the supply side with different support tools to how to succeed with public procurement. And I think in this context, it's also very important not to forget about the total defense perspective. And I guess I represent the civil side of this in this panel. And I think also I want to highlight the need also of thinking about the host nation support, because I think a lot of the communities are not really staffed for the NATO capabilities and the demands that comes with this. We often do a survey on public procurement from the Swedish National Agency for Public Procurement, and the last one we also asked how is the readiness and how do you use the security apply issues in your procurements and in your agreements. And looking at the municipalities that will be to a great extent responsible for the host nation support, and the agencies, only 20% of them answer that they actually have included security supply aspects in their procurements. So I think there's a lot of work to be done here, even of course there are a lot of good examples as well. So my point is basically that I think we need to see public procurement as a strategic tool also in the total defense perspective, especially on the civil side, and that needs to go along with the military side, or else there will be no host nation support, for example, if the municipalities are not ready.
Yeah.
So
we had an interesting conversation yesterday, you and Anja, about also you participate in quite a lot of international conferences with other similar agencies where you try to do lessons learned between different countries. And previously, there's not been a lot focus on defense, so what maybe we can learn from defense. Do you want to share some reflections on that, maybe?
Well, absolutely. I'm active in the OECD context, especially the public procurement parts. And I was telling Hanna yesterday that there's a yearly public procurement conference in September. And last year was the first time that they actually had defense procurement on the agenda. And now somehow this has been, of course, during the times that we all are in, it's more and more important. And I see that now they actually have this big conference next week in Paris, the OECD. And one of the topics that are more actually in focus is defense procurement and how you can align civil and defense procurement and what lessons you can actually make for the civil side from working with defense procurement as Helene is.
I think it's super interesting. Eva, going back to the armed forces, do you see any clear operational consequences of delayed capability deliverment? And how are you trying to speed up innovation? Yeah, I know you want a lab, but what do you do with what you got? Do you work with other allies as well to try to learn lessons from them? Please share your views.
Of course we do, and we work a lot with FMV as well, according to that. Of course, there are we are hampered if there are that much delays and driven costs as well, because that is the problem we see today. And to be honest, I guess also that the interest for military spending, military fundings today is, of course, that we are pushing it up to 3.5 or 5%. Then, of course, there are merchant companies, of course, or private companies very much interested of investing. So, of course, the interest is not only of the social part, to say, and of course the costs are driven as well. So the risk today is that it's delayed because there are so much competition into it, but also that the costs are being actually driven. Since you know that there are money into it, and that means that we get less lethal, we get less survivability, and of course we can't actually provide that kind of security both for Sweden and for the alliance as we want to. And speaking about the private side, of course the companies that actually are maybe bought from some bigger companies and so on, that could also be ongoing. But if we fail in the armed forces, then we fail in freedom of democracy. So I think that cost is a cost that we actually can't have. So maybe we have different things that actually drive us to perform.
Yeah. No, for sure. And Helen, I know that you briefly touched upon it, but I think maybe you want to elaborate a bit, like how you at FMV are working with, as Eva said, robust procurement, things that works, delivery on time, together with the speed and innovation. I know the Ukraine cases here in Sweden has been an excellent example of new ways, new procurement, but maybe you want to share a bit about that.
Yes, but as
Oh yeah, Helen, if we switch all of us a bit here. Yeah,
okay.
no worries.
Well, it's as Paul said, it's not just about speeding up the procurement.
No.
It's about the whole acquisition process to make that whole process faster. And working with the procurement is not enough.
No.
So we need to reshape the entire chain from how we define our needs, how we procure, and how we implement.
Yeah.
And the full system needs to speed up, and all actors within it, of course. So not just us. But at FMV, we work with strengthening our internal processes and using the existing procurement tools, such as different procurement procedures, as you've seen at the Ukraine case.
Yeah.
And like frameworks, agreements, competitive dialogue, and dynamic purchasing systems. And of course, continuously working with to ensure that the requirements are clearly defined.
Yeah.
But we need to work with how we work with the requirements.
Yeah.
We can't use to have the specific technical descriptions. We need to more work with functional, what we need to have.
Yeah, and I think the Ukraine cases are great examples of that. You have innovation-driven procurement, capability procurement based on specific needs, sometimes very niche, but it's still a different way to procure. Would you say it's also a culture shift in how you do things?
Yes.
Of course, you can always change your policies, but we come from a long history of doing one thing in a certain way, and now we're trying to move that whole thing. Do you see that at FMV as well?
Yes, I do. We are working with it all the time to see. But we need to, all the actors in the chain need to work with doing things in another ways.
Yeah.
We need to have early dialogue with our industries. We need to be more specific what needs we have from the states as well.
Yeah.
So we can prepare the industries, what will come. And we also need to work how we implement the contracts when it's being signed.
Yeah.
Because that's when the real job starts.
Yeah, the whole chain.
The whole
From the UK, what's your reaction when you hear this based on what's going on over there? I know you've been working on the similar topics for quite a few years. Please share your reflection.
So I recognise and agree with everything that's been said. I think so I think it's useful to kind of move the discussion into how do you do that?
Yeah.
And I think there are different levels at which you can think about this. So your whole system point, I think, is really, really important. And that actually starts with what do you buy? So when and this is absolutely inseparable from your doctrine point, Eva. You know, the pace and development of technology and the pace and development of doctrine are inseparable. You can't really think of the two things apart. Just a case in point in and you'll know this. In Ukraine, in the maritime drone sphere, the time lag between a capability being delivered and the countermeasure to that capability is about 4 to 6 weeks right now. 4 to 6 weeks. Some of our procurements take decades. Okay, so why is it 4 to 6 weeks? It's 4 to 6 weeks because the technology that they're using is very open, it's very available, it's very easy to amend, and importantly, to a large degree, it's software defined. So by taking a drone and changing the software, you can change its capability quite dramatically, and you can do that really quickly. So if you zoom out from that and go, well, how do we take this whole enterprise and get to a place where we can do things faster? Software defining as much of the capability as you can, really helpful. Having an open system that people can, that many actors can access, and even compete on a capability basis to get into, really helpful. And then enabling the system to do that does involve attacking some of how do we go about making the acquisition system and approvals and architected capability work, and then how do we contract for that in more of a portfolio approach, where those who are buying have a bit more flexibility to take a broader approach to things, and then have failure in the system. Because if you don't have an allowance for failure in some ways, achieving innovation is super difficult, because you don't innovate by being right first time. That's not a thing. and so we have to allow for that, and there are portfolio approaches that are being provided. And in one area in the UK right now, we're leading in an area of land electronic warfare, where we've created a software-defined open platform where we work alongside the MOD to continually evolve what the requirement is, and then we have a proper ecosystem underneath with the open boundaries, so different players can come in and out of that are competing on what is the best capability answer to this use case to get their solution onto the platform. And that creates a competitive environment where the competitive energy, instead of going into the commercial side of it, where in the past, say, some may have closed down system architectures and owned interfaces so that they can control an area of business, the competitive energy goes into, how do I make my capability the best it can be and get it to market? So there are things that can be done by architecting the capability and flowing that through into how you approach the market you buy from.
Eva, from the Armed Forces perspective, do you have any ideal situation how we could collaborate between procurement, operations, your day-to-day being at the Armed Forces as well as with industry?
Absolutely. I think less bureaucracy, less paperwork, more cooperation between the practitioners and the industries, because I think when they meet, every time I've seen them meeting each other, then things are happening. But if you continue just to write the papers and the demands on paper, then it will take too long time. So we need to have a little bit more of burden sharing. Because the burden can't only stay with the state, and the industry is waiting for the perfect demands. But because I really think that maybe the cost sharing, the burden sharing, it must go together and walk together. I think we have great examples. We have the Black Hawk system, and every time you say Black Hawk, when we actually procured the helicopters to Afghanistan, because that was an urgent need. And when you say that to people that are very driven by the processes and procedures, that was a horrible situation. Well, we still have the Black Hawks in the armed forces, and there's a reason for it. So maybe more what's on the market. Can we try it? Can we have that to our system and just try it? Does it work in our region? For example, where I come from, the Baltic Sea is a very specific region with certain demands. You can't buy which sonars you want because they are very much tailored for that environment. So I think working together and do that from the start and be more positive about changes in demands, because that is another way. You really still believe that you can put the demands here, and 10 years later the perfect product will appear. And we heard 4 to 6 weeks where there are changes in the development and then the changes in the tactics and everything. Then you can't have that long time and really do believe that there are no changes in the requirements on the way. So working together from the start. Less paperwork, more trial and error, and be positive about the failures, because I think it's from the failures we learn.
Yeah, for sure. We talk a lot about in the Swedish system, of course, to getting more things in the hands of the sort of pilots and marines, to try them out, to play around with, to see what works with your tactics, what you can add on, what you should maybe not add on. So I think you have a very important point there.
I can take a great example from Portugal. In Portugal, there's an annually exercise called REPMUS, where they try unmanned systems, especially in the underwater systems. And the Portuguese chief navy, he told me a couple of years ago, or maybe it was just last year, but he told me that he gets lots of systems into his navy and just try them out. And actually he bought Chinese stuff as well, just to open them up and say how does it work, and then try them in the system all the time, and then building new systems, actually putting them together again and say, go to the industry and say, okay, who can deliver 100 of those, because now we try them. So that is another way of how we can actually have the tempo a little bit higher in the procurement wise.
Helene from FMV, will you be able to do what Eva wishes for, or have you already been working with it? I'm just very curious, because this sounds great. We see other countries doing it. I know you've been working on some aspects, but please share.
We have to figure out how we do that.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Anja, from the civil side, I know that the civilian and military part has to go hand in hand. We know the municipalities are not maybe where everybody think they are. What are your key thoughts on the best case scenario of a good process for making them go hand in hand, delivering capabilities faster, making sure that the civilian defense can support the military defense that we all assume it should?
Well, actually, I think there's an ongoing revision, as you know, of the European Union Public Procurement Act. Yeah. And here, I think we've discussed a lot within the National Agency of Public Procurement, and NAP, that we think that there are exceptions that are allowed on the military side also should be allowed on the civil side. So I think that's actually a key. Regarding the environment that we are, we have highlighted some points here. For example, that the exception from advertising needs to be reviewed in difficult times. And of course, also it should be expressly permitted for procuring authorities, for example, to ask for domestic production, warehousing for reason of resilience. And the same should also, of course, be applied to services that are needed to provide all of this, both on the military side and on the civil side, because you often forgot about the services that are needed to actually use the products, no matter if they're on the civil side or in the military side. So we also think, we have highlighted in our answer to the European Commission, that letters of intent should be used more, and also that you can pre-qualify suppliers to actually work with crisis requisites, so you actually have to save time when you need it. And I often hear, and I guess Helene hears it too, that the public procurement rules are such a bottleneck. But I mean, as I see it, it's fully possible to actually perform rapid procurements, and actually, if you use the spectrum that are the procedures that actually exist. For example, Helene, we're talking about competitive dialogue, but also, I mean, the RFE purposes, that's not commonly used everywhere. I also think that innovation partnership, you were talking about trying out and failing. Well, that's a good example. And of course, negotiated procedures. But I would like also to highlight the innovation partnership, because here there's also some room for actually fail money that are necessary to actually drive innovation. And I guess you will need that. So from my perspective, it's fully possible to use the public procurements regulations, but to use them more and actually try all the methods that are within the regulations, because very few organizations are actually using, for example, innovation partnership and competitive dialogue. And I think that's the key, to find out what has the market actually to offer, because the agencies and the municipalities, they don't know that.
No.
So the dialogue, here we come back to the dialogue actually, and working together from the start and listening to the market.
Yeah. Paul, you want to add on to that?
So I think that's a really interesting point around what you can do within the rules you already have. I confess I'm not deeply familiar with the public procurement rules in Sweden, but in the UK, what I have seen over the last 20 years or so in defence is the results are as much about mindset of those involved as they are about the rules of the game as they are written. And because you can have a cultural environment, and I've seen this where people do feel they can't fail, where they do worry about what might happen down in the future, about their decisions, then you get we're going to cover every angle of this, we're going to tick every box, and we're going to do every single piece of paperwork that we possibly could in this scenario in order to make sure that I'm not to blame in the future if something goes wrong. And you can have a different mindset, which is, what do we need to achieve? How do we need to achieve it? Here's the process. What do I have to do to make this outcome successful? And how do I just record why I've not done the things that could be done but haven't? And I think that will create a much reduced bureaucracy around how you can use the rules that are already in play. And then the second point I'd make is there is a case for looking at, are the rules that we have now appropriate to the situation that we face? Because I know from the UK, our rules around, for example, how we do single source procurement are very well tuned to how do you take a defence industrial base and squeeze it as tight as you can so it can deliver just what you need at the minimum possible cost. And that is what the system is essentially designed to do. Right now, that is not what we need. What we need is pace of delivery, and that requires both a different set of rules and a different mindset about how we play to those rules.
Great. I would like to open up if there's any questions from the audience, because I realize we might running out of time. Tony, my wonderful colleague, is in charge of passing around the microphone, and people are also outside. So Tony, you have to have a wide vision focus, both inside and outside, if there anyone who would like to ask a question. Otherwise, I have tons more, so I'm just giving the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you for the conversation. So you talked a lot about the innovation cycles and being software centric. If we focus on the other side of the spectrum, which is volume and quantity, how would your organization change the numbers actually being procured and not only the capability and the innovation?
Great. Who wants to take that question first?
I can start.
Yeah, go Eva. Brave.
I believe that when you have the capabilities, it's quite much easier to rise the capacity wise. If you have that, if the channel is open, so to say, and then you can procure. But of course, as I said, there are lots of industries today that the orders, the books are quite filled. So then I go back to what I said before. It's a burden sharing actually. So we're talking about mindset, and we can go about leadership as well. So it's about risk. How much risk do you want to put into it? Is there a risk that 5 years ahead, the industries which procure military capacity and capabilities, 5 years ahead, are they done or not? Will they invest in greater stocks and so on? So it's about a burden sharing there as well. So we need everyone to have a higher appetite for the risk.
I think going back to risk, I mean, I'm working with a lot of the defense industries here in Sweden, and the amount of capacity increase has been significant the last years. So I'm also adding on to that question to you, and love to hear your other thoughts as well, is usually when, and this is also goes for larger system, but we all usually get into the debate if every single country procure their own thing with their own specific requirements. Even if it's the same system, it also delays and it's harder to scale. as well as if you get into a real situation, it's also tougher to work out that logistic-wise in terms of spare parts and all of that. So are you working more, maybe this is more for Helen, more with other international partners, but of course with the support of the armed forces in terms of procuring more the same things, or not adapting the same thing to your own standards? How are you seeing the evolvement of that aspect?
Yes, we are working a lot with NATO agencies,
Yeah.
procurement agencies, and we see the benefits of having the same requirements and standardizations of things, and the NATO agencies also figuring out how to speed up the procurement phase, because everyone is facing the load at work right now in the industries. But I think also that we need to be transparent early what we need from the state to let the industry knows. And that's actually one thing that was discussed last week at one of the NATO agencies, to be more specific in each area what the competitive target should be in the future. So that will hopefully help the industries.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, and I think that what you just said is a really, really important point. It's each area. So we have a saying in the UK, which may or may not work here, and I'm an engineer by background, so forgive me, which is right tool, right job. So to your point around the different kinds of things we buy, we do need to recognise that this is a really broad spectrum, and I confess I did focus particularly on the software-centric side of things. But when you're buying bombs and bullets, or you're buying ships and submarines, there are obviously different approaches to that. So how you might build the hull of a submarine is something that probably isn't going to change that quickly over the next 10, 20 years, whereas the software that goes into the submarine really is. So for the software that goes into the submarine, you have to think about the architected approach. How do you provide an open playing field and that's your plan for the future. When it comes to building the hull of a submarine, you have to think about, actually, how do I plan the productive capacity to deliver that at the rate that we need to deliver that? And the same can go for, say, bombs and bullets. What is the rate of consumption likely to be? What resilience do I need to build into that based on the wide range of scenarios that unfold? And how do I plan for a base level of productive capacity, and then the ability to scale that as the scenario changes, at the pace that the scenario changes. So for different points on the spectrum of what we buy, you need to have a slightly different approach that considers different aspects of what you're trying to do.
We're coming to an end of this panel, and I would love... Oh, yeah, we have a follow-up.
Follow-up question.
That's fine.
But I think
This is Almedalen. You're doing fine.
Paul partly addressed the answer here, but if we take it as an easy example, so you have a super intelligent drone. That drone is pretty useless if you don't have access to the electronic components, the metal components, the assembly, the energetics. What will you do to incentivize the industry to build more metal components, more electronic components? Because it's not only about the innovation, it's about the quantity. We had a great example from the FMV or from the government last week with the defense industry changing the purchasing pattern, most likely placing longer purchase orders. That's one great tool. What more examples are there?
And I think that goes for the requirements as well, because we have, as we said before, we come from times when you order just enough, and you don't actually believe that you're going to use that system, so you don't need to sustain it, or you don't need the resilience and the redundancy and so on. I think we have a different mindset today, that we really believe that there is a risk that we are going to use all the bullets, so we need even more, even greater. I think Ukraine has really supported us with a huge portion of experiences in that matter. How much bullets actually can we figure out that we need? We haven't had that thoughts before, because of the economy was that low that you have to prioritize that totally away then.
Yeah. Great.
But the answer how we make the industries to put all those different bits and pieces, I hand over to the other part of the panel actually.
I know.
We can make the demands. Yeah.
Helen, would you like to add to that? How you at FMV are working to actually incentivize industry to maybe higher the quantity and also on subcomponents that might not be completely clarified always when you put out your demands and when we have our strategic dialogue early. How are you been working on that? Or you have plans on working
We
on
are
that?
working, and we are also trying to figure out, because we are, as we said, we are in a new phase of, and we're trying to use every tool in the requirements that we have, the procurement regulations. We need to use the whole toolbox, and we need to look at longer contracts. We need to look at financial. We need to look at a lot of things, and we are working with it. But we are also learning.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. It's a good choice.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think it's also a fair point to work both with long-term requirements as well as short-term to try to match those and have two thoughts in our head at the same time, right? So we're finishing off. I will let you share one final reflection or send off a message to the audience before we round up. If there's anything you forgot to say, any reflection on based on this panel, did you learn something new? This is your opportunity to shine. And we will start off with Anja, because I never started with you before in this panel, so there you go.
Well, thank you. And I learned a lot of new things today. Very interesting to hear about how it's working out in the armed forces. And I think the civil side here has a lot to learn, actually, regarding procurements and the rapid speed that actually is at the moment in your procurements. But I was thinking there's a lot of good examples on joint procurement actually working out in the defense side. And I think you were talking about shared risk. That's, of course, an important part of it. But I think also to share a common vision or goals on the actual purpose that you're supposed to meet with your procurements. And, of course, the sense of urgency. And here I can see that the civil side has a lot of to learn from this. But it's also interesting to see that you also can apply some of the lessons learned from defense procurement to the civil side. And I think the civil side of the total defense needs to be included when planning for military defense, or else you won't get total deliveries that you need for society. And I think it's interesting as well to add on just finally that in the OECD context, this is actually emerging as a big topic. How can we work together in the total defense perspective? And would it be possible on the civil side in a global arena to actually do joint procurements? So I think, there's an exciting future coming along here.
Very much looking forward to follow that as well. Helen, your final thoughts, send-off messages.
Well, yes, I think we need to, as I said, look at the whole acquisition process to speed up and I think we need to think more about what's good enough, not specific things. We need to know. We need to think that things are good enough, and we can make mistake and learn from the failure.
Yeah.
We once have a competitive dialogue, not with FMV, but in another company, and turn out to be a monologue. So competitive monologue, but that was
A new procedure method.
new procedure.
Well, you learn from that as well, right?
Yes, we did. We learned a lot of that.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. So we have to learn from mistakes, and we have to accept that we do them.
Yeah.
And I also think that the importance of an early dialogue, we need to have that in mind when we are making procurement.
And Eva, your final comment.
The final comment is that I really do believe in competitiveness. I think because that makes us better. Sometimes we're using the word consolidate, and if that word means that we are going to have one supplier for submarines and one for fighter jets in Europe, I don't believe that, because that is not long lasting. Guess why I just took the submarines and fighter jets as examples, but that will not be that will not endure. That is not sustainable. But I also believe that today, 2025, I also believe that there are so many in the societies in Sweden and abroad that actually taking their brooms and started to clean. in front of their own door, actually, and not blaming others to speed up, but actually realize they're looking into the mirror and say, okay, what can I do to speed up? Because if all the puzzles are merged together, I think we will become greater.
Yeah. Paul?
So I think the thing I've learned today is that a lot of the challenges you're facing in Sweden, we too are facing the UK, and I suspect every country in Europe, if not further, is too. I think the point that I would emphasise is that this is very much an enterprise sport, one that starts with the government of the day and is conducted in industry as well as by the armed forces on the front line. And I think in terms of some of the more contractual points that we've made, I think the shorter we can make the timelines around that, the closer we can make the engagement, the more everybody in the enterprise understands the intent, where we intend to go, then the better the outcomes will be, including even in investor sentiment around what they will invest in, where, when, and why. So I think that's my main reflection from today.
Excellent. And I think as a last comment, we're all standing here because we want to provide the best possible defense to ensure our democracy, our security, and our freedom together with our allies. And that's what we're all going to work with every single day to do, and to provide you guys with the best possible things that you can get. So with that, I would like to thank you as a panel for sharing your thoughts on this early morning. We kicked off this week great, and give them a warm round of applause. And the next seminar starts at 9 o'clock.